Welcome to the Calumet Roundtable. I'm your host, Tom Roach. I'm joined today by my guests, Dr. Carolyn Boiarsky and James Martinez. Our topic today is going to be the media coverage of the new Trump presidency. My guests have a background in this area. Carolyn, mostly from the East Coast, worked for UPI starting in 1964. And then went to CBS affiliate in 1966 and was later hired again by CBS in '68 for election coverage. She also freelanced for the New Republic, I believe. Jim was initially the editor of Los Vecinos, I believe. Yes, section for the Sun-Times in Chicago. He then became city editor and associate managing editor of the newspaper. We all then did stints in public relations and advertising and things like that. And I've worked on several political campaigns. I suppose you touched on a couple too. But we really want to look at today is how is Trump being received by the news media? And this is a different situation here, or is it? And how's he reacting to it, and how are they treating him? And I'd like to just start by saying that it seems to me, and Carolyn, I'm especially interested in hearing what you have to say about this. It seems to me that the last time we had a situation where there was strong public reaction to a sitting president was in the '60s when the Vietnam War was escalating and the protests were going on against the war, and then when Johnson was president, and then in '68 when Nixon was elected, and then actually escalated the war, and the protests, of course, got even stronger. And he was, Nixon in particular was, and I'm not talking about the Watergate investigations, but just in general, there was a lot of kind of humiliating comments and things that were made about him. What's your recollection of that time, and what do you think about the comparison?
I think in terms of the news media, the media were still extremely objective at that time.
Yeah.
But what you had was a split between the news being presented and editorial. And so this was certainly in print, you had the editorial columns, but it included the media, television. Those were the days when Eric Sevareid came on at CBS when they were through presenting the news in a very objective fashion. And then Sevareid presented his commentary, his editorial. So there was this kind of split. The news media really, at that time, really tried to be objective, as much as they disliked Spiro Agnew.
Right.
They tried to report on it as objectively as they could.
Well, and maybe I need to broaden that a little bit, because I'm thinking of more than just the main news channels and newspapers. There were a lot of underground newspapers springing up at the time. There were comedians doing impersonations and things. So. If you include all that in this, do you think that that we lost a little respect for the presidency during that period, or not?
Because you would ask Nixon a question and he would circumvent it.
Yeah.
Or he would provide an answer that wasn't exactly what, if we had fact checkers in those days, would have come through.
Yeah.
But we didn't have fact checkers. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a lot of people getting on and checking out what was being said. Yeah. So all you had at that time, for the majority of people, was the major media.
Right.
And then, yes, you had all these other areas that were providing but they were reflecting what the public wanted. They were not there providing a view that the public didn't want.
I apologize. I have to wade in here just
for
a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that, yes, it's true that media didn't have fact checkers back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. That's because the media were fact checkers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And something has happened to the media, I think, and that's a fundamental difference that's taken place. Arguably, the media back then was fairly respective of the institution of the presidency. They didn't report on, going back for generations, they didn't report on the fact that Roosevelt was handicapped. They didn't report on the dalliances of the Kennedys. They didn't report on a whole bunch of stuff that was actually taking place out of respect for the office. And then to your point, the office kind of lost respect. At the same time, the media started, there was a branch of the media that started taking seriously its mission of reporting what it felt to be the truth. And now we're kind of in a confused state where it's hard to keep track of what is truth and what is...
Right.
Are you talking about alternate fact, truth?
Yeah, well, so, and obviously one of the parallels here is that both Nixon and Trump have some serious character issues. And so, which seems to invite this sort of thing. One of the amazing things to me is that in a newspaper recently, it was the, I think I've got a note on this, I think it was a Dominican newspaper, The National. They did a story on Trump's comments about settlements in Jerusalem, and the front page story, and they had a picture of Netanyahu, and next to that they had a picture of Trump, only they got it wrong and they ran a picture of Alec Baldwin doing a Trump impersonation. That's amusing, but it's also indicative of how strong the reaction has been against Trump, right? And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve this, believe me, but I just, I think you have to go back to the Nixon era to see something like that. One of the, this was not Time magazine, but it was one of the more esoteric magazines I remember ran an article. Someone was in a bathroom in the bathroom stall, and the Secret Service came in and checked the bathroom and checked him out, and then Johnson came in and went into the stall next to him, and this guy wrote an article about what he saw and heard from his stall, and this was published maybe 1968. Again, not mainstream press, but it was just part of the general degrading of the office, I think, and of the the person in the office.
Well, the flip side of that is that we've become a more casual society, a more egalitarian society, I think. Yeah. And so where we used to have enormous respect for institutions, like the presidency, right. I think we feel differently about it. I don't think we necessarily put people who represent us on a pedestal anymore, the way we used to back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And oddly enough, people as a result don't behave the way they used to back in the 60s and the 70s, which just continues the momentum of the change.
But I think, again, going back to the presidency itself, the New York Times just did something, and this is the media, the general major media, did something that it has never done before. And I don't think it was because that the public's more informal response, but because of what they saw as their responsibility to inform the public. And there was even a story on their decision to use the term lie. This has never been done before. And it made a headline. And this is something that the used to be, it wouldn't even have been an editorial back in those days. That would have been a more tactful comment. That there was it was misspoken. I forget which president we kept saying somebody had misspoke. But when you start having headlines that say, this is a lie, the stories I've noticed now say, Trump said, provided this false statement. They're specifying it is false from the beginning. They're not leaving it up to the public to understand that this was false.
Well, it seems to me that they need to do that, right? I mean, if you have a president who is being that fast and loose with his comments, it's the job of the press to call him on it, don't you think?
I feel it is.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's a job that I think the media hasn't been doing very well for the last few years, and certainly not very well throughout the election campaign.
Just to go back for a second to another example, the comments that were made about Obama during his 8 years, I mean, they were also from the right, but also very exaggerated, very demeaning sometimes. You know, we've taken this a step further, I think, right? I mean, is this the you know, the right getting back at the left? How do you look at that?
I think we live in a world of hyperbole. We've gotten to the point where if someone disagrees with you, they are automatically a fascist, or they're a communist, or they're a socialist, as opposed to they're somebody with whom I disagree. The problem is that as you escalate the rhetoric, it doesn't leave you much room at the other end.
Right.
So what happens if someone is seriously deficient in some way, or seriously holds some opinions that are a violation of the norm?
So if we call Trump a racist because of his immigration policy, what do we call David Duke, right? What words do we have left for somebody who is associated with the Ku Klux Klan, right?
Well, you either
is that what we're getting at here?
You either end up with creating new words or new terms, or you recalibrate everything so that we start treating people more civilly if they just disagree with us, and you save those communist and Nazi and fascist terms for people who are.
I wonder if some of this is caused by the social media itself, the concept of tweeting, emails, getting information out fast. That the civil world that used to have civility in terms of civil world, spend time thinking about what you were saying, using words carefully. Right. This is gone. This is not done anymore. But
it was done more by Obama than it's being done right now by Trump, certainly.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But the public itself, I think, has become uncivil.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. The Calumet Roundtable will be right back. Welcome back to the Calumet Roundtable. I'm your host, Tom Roach. My guests today are Dr. Carolyn Boiarsky and James Martinez. We're going to continue our discussion about tweets, social media, and alternate facts regarding the new Trump presidency and the news media and the media in general. We broke off talking about how maybe over the last few years here we've used such strong language to express ourselves about things we disliked about presidents that now if we have someone who has maybe exceeded our expectations for what could go wrong, we don't have language to describe this with anymore. One of the issues with I think the new president is that he's tweeting foreign policy and things like that. How problematic is that?
I mean, we live in a world where the president's opinion holds great weight, and where the president's opinion about a company, for example, can drive share prices up or down.
Right.
And so,
Didn't the Soviet Union actually go up a couple stages in their defense system because Reagan made that comment on a microphone about we're bombing the Soviet. You recall that?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, they went, like we have DEFCON 2 and 3 and all that. They went to their DEFCON 3 or something because of a comment. So, yeah, I mean, certainly things that the president says had huge impact. Okay, good. So now, if he's doing this, if he's tweeting this stuff, this is an absurd thing to do. Would you agree?
Let's say that the discretion would be the better part of valor here.
Yeah, now because for the United States government, right, we have hundreds of people working in diplomacy, in the foreign service, and in the military, are assessing these things. We've got, the SEC looking at what's going on in businesses and stuff. And so when the president makes a statement, usually, about foreign policy or about the health of the economy or something, it's a very guarded, very considered statement where they've anticipated the reaction that it's going to have. Trump tweets this stuff out carelessly, right? Now, can we say, how do we describe that? I mean, what is that? Do you say, well, he's an idiot? Do you say he's irresponsible? He's immature? What language do we use to explain what's going on here?
Immature?
Immaturity?
Immature. David, and I can't think of his name, that's on the PBS NewsHour periodically, used the term, and I think it's a perfect term.
Yeah.
By the time you become an adult, you're supposed to recognize what your words can convey,
right,
and what the consequences of those are. And as you just pointed out, they can have worldwide economic and political consequences, certainly for the President of the United States. And to allow your emotions, your urges to take precedent. On the other hand, I'm not sure these are not thought through ahead of time and with an idea of he is going to influence.
That would comfort me to know that, because I think they're not, and that bothers me more.
I think it worries me as to what he thinks the consequences will be. But I think that's all part of this whole presidency, that we really don't know what the consequences of what he is doing will be.
On the maturity issue, one of my students said yesterday, and maybe this is a quote from someone, but he said, he was told when he was young that anyone could grow up to be president, and now he's learned that you don't have to grow up.
There's a certain amount of impetuousness that's involved in, that's reflected by some of the tweets, the president's tweets, and it's the kind of impetuousness that you would expect from someone who's never had to work in an organization as large as the U.S. government.
Right.
The Trump organization may employ a few hundred people, perhaps even a few thousand. The U.S. government employs millions. Right. The U.S. government has relationships with literally 180 countries around the world. And that, means that you can't just tweet from the hip. You can't just say whatever comes into your head, because it does have ramifications.
And that's pretty disturbing, I think, right? So how do you make that point now? I mean, how do you get that across to somebody who doesn't, didn't take a civics class and doesn't appreciate how dangerous this is?
He did take a civics class.
Well, he did, but I mean, let's say you're reporting this, right? And you really want to get it across that we've got a dangerous situation here.
We don't know.
Because immature is a pretty general term, right?
The problem is all we can do, and I think that's what the press is doing. Part of it is we can go back, as you just did, and say, someone did something like this, and here was the ramification. Yeah. And actually, if you look at the ramifications of what Reagan said, the ramifications were that the Russians did put more money into their military base to the point where they were economically broke, and the whole Soviet Union broke down.
Right.
And it all broke down. So that statement can be said, can be looked at as, even though he did it without realizing what he was doing, it was a good thing. So who is to know that what Trump is now doing may not result in that. And who knows whether Trump has studied enough of Reagan to think that's what he's going to do.
The problem that we've got here is we were looking at the two major players on the scale. And even though we've since learned that Russia, then the Soviet Union, wasn't as strong as we thought they were, we thought they were strong. And so you needed strong rhetoric in order to brush back. In this particular case, the United States outspends literally every country in the world militarily. In fact, I think we outspend the top 10 spenders in military matters. And so what you've got here is a man who's using rhetoric to potentially change people's perceptions, but it's not like there's another big bully on the block that we have to worry about. So I'm not quite sure what the end is in this game. It's not working. It would be nice if somebody told him. It would also be nice for I think, the media or others to start explaining to the American public that while it could be amusing, we're not living a reality show.
Well, and you know, there's a term for what you described. When someone in a leadership position claims that there's an enemy out there and that they're protecting people from that enemy, and there is no enemy, that's called demagoguery, right? And that's something that, you know, that the earliest democracy in Greece was concerned about, right? They had words for it. Let's just look at to what extent Trump is fighting back here, right? He's made some comments, obviously, about the media, and there's been a long history of presidents and presidential candidates kind of counterattacking the media. You know, actually, Nixon did this even before Watergate, because when he ran for governor of California and lost, I think, in '62, he gave a press conference and went off in the media and said, "You won't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore," and he claimed he was quitting politics. Then when the Watergate thing came up when he was president, he accused them of you know, trying to railroad him, and you know, said they didn't have sources for their facts, et cetera, et cetera. Gary Hart attacked the news media when they brought information out about the boat trip he took on the monkey business. George Bush Sr. Attacked the news media when they tried to tie him to Iran-Contra when he was running for president after Reagan was out. So where's Trump on this scale here? Is he effective at this?
Off the charts. I mean, first of all, the news media has been under attack for years. Certainly from day one that I walked into a newsroom, it was under attack. Yeah. But it's the grounds over which you are being attacked that's made the difference. It used to be that people would attack you because they didn't like your politics or because they thought you were biased. But they never attacked you because they thought you were making up news, making up facts. And that's a problem. And so an interesting response.
I think Nixon might have been accused of that, but yes, go ahead.
An interesting response is that somebody just leveled that attack against a newspaper in Colorado, and that newspaper, which is managed by an attorney, in fact, has threatened to sue them in court over libel because they have the facts. And so the argument is you're slandering us.
So if the president says those aren't the facts, right?
If the president says you're publishing fake news, you can demonstrably prove that you're not.
Yeah. But I guess my concern is, who believes that?
Those people that voted for him.
Really? Do you think they believe? Or do you think? Because I think some people voted for him because it was just a protest vote.
But
I don't think they were all taken in by him.
Maybe not. But I don't think those same people are going to be taken in by the fact that we find alternate facts. I think you have a solid group of the public who has accepted everything he is saying, whether or not they may not believe it, but they're accepting it. And until he hurts them, I don't think they are going to stop listening to him.
Okay, well, I guess what's most curious to me about this, though, is the severity of the accusation, right? I mean, Gary Hart said, well, you said you were watching me all night, but you took a break to go get something to eat. So he was quibbling about some specific thing. George Bush said, you know, we already covered Iran-Contra. This isn't newsworthy anymore. He was telling them they weren't covering news. But Trump's saying you made those facts up to major newspapers here, right? I mean, who believes that? I mean, you know, it's one thing. I mean, you might convince me that a reporter has some bias, right? Or that maybe an editor favored one story over another, right? But to accuse a major newspaper of making stuff up, I mean...
Well, I'll tell you who will believe it, the people who don't read that newspaper anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, the people who don't consume major media are the ones who are most likely to be receptive to accusations or allegations that major media is making up facts.
Okay, well, let's look at it this way. Give me an example of a newspaper just making something up. I mean, maybe we go back to Hearst and the Spanish-American War.
Remember the Maine, sure.
Those days of yellow journalism.
Yeah.
And go back to the federal
Most of those yellow journalists were covering real stuff, though. I mean, those crimes against workers and things were going on.
Yeah.
Well, but they sort of created the war.
That war, they certainly did.
Yeah. But that wasn't... the yellow journalists were going after the establishment.
Let's be a little more careful about our terms, because I'm not sure I know what yellow journalism means in your definition.
All right, okay.
But have there been cases where newspapers have manufactured stuff? Yes, and I think they've been recorded. And
anything in our lifetimes?
In our lifetimes?
Yeah.
No,
I can't think of it.
I can't think of it.
Yeah.
So.
Seriously.
Can't think of a thing.
No. What about some extreme cases of editorials on Fox News or something? Do they ever just make something up that you know of?
Fox News has on a couple of occasions been caught in reporting small stories that were inaccurate or partially inaccurate.
Okay, that's all the time we have for our program. Thank you for joining us today on the Calumet Roundtable. I'm your host, Tom Roach. Have a great day.